Father God, thank you for everyone here. And just as we go through your word, I pray that we would set aside all distractions and just focus on what it is you have to say, and that we would understand the text as you would have us understand it, that your Spirit would be with us as we go through your word, and that we would take these words out into the world and that they would help transform us into better Christians who love those around us and love you more than we did before. And it's in your name alone that we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Alrighty. We are getting just about halfway through this book. Finally. Not that we're like in a rush per se to get through the book, but it's kind of nice getting, seeing the progress we're making. So hopefully today we'll get through chapters 22 through 24. I don't want to spend too much time necessarily on context, but if I could maybe just have someone kind of summarize what we went through last week, and then we can kind of just hop in.
So the big picture stuff, just for the whole book, is that Ezekiel is he's a prophet who is ministering during the time period of the looming Babylonian exile, right? So for the last several hundred years, the people of Israel and the people of Judah, they kind of split, and they both have been sinning against God. He has sent countless prophets to get onto them and to warn them that bad things are coming. The northern kingdom fell to the Assyrians a few hundred years earlier, and now where we're at, the southern kingdom is about to follow the Babylonians. And so there have been several waves of deportation. Basically, the first two waves are, like the first wave, I think it's like the royalty and stuff that are sent away. The second wave, I believe, is like the craftsmen and everything.
I think so.
And then the third wave is the rest of the people, and that's when Jerusalem actually falls. And so where we've been at in Ezekiel is building up to that third deportation. So Ezekiel, he was sent away in the first deportation. He is living in Babylon, and pretty much everything that he's been prophesying throughout the book is preparing people for the fact that Jerusalem is going to be destroyed very soon. And his whole job that really sets him apart from like the other prophets is that he's described as like a watchman, right? So if you think like ancient times, fortified city, a watchman is the guy who he's up on the top of the wall, and he looks out, and his single job is to let people know when danger's coming. And so Ezekiel, God is telling him the danger's coming, and his job is to simply let people know. And so he's really doing it in every way possible. So he preaches sermons, he kind of preaches parables, and sometimes he even like lives it out and acts things out, to where he does very weird things compared to the other prophets, right?
Yeah.
Things that we have not seen people like Isaiah or Jeremiah do. Ezekiel is called to like live on his side for like a year, and then live on his other side for like a few months, and he's called to eat bread that was cooked over like fire made from poop. And it's like he's called to do all these very weird things and like create like a diorama of Jerusalem and lay a siege wall against it, and doing all these things just to communicate to people destruction is coming, right? He's like the original like fire and brimstone preacher with like the sign that says like the end is nigh, and everybody kind of thinks he's crazy. And so that's like the big picture. I didn't really get into like the previous chapters, but
Yeah.
that's just like a big picture of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can leave it to somebody else who wants to cover like the most recent chapters we've been in.
Yeah. So last week we went through chapters just 20 and 21, and we'd kind of seen that in chapter 20, God kind of like went through Israel's history, where he just kind of went through, ever since back in Egypt, the people of Israel had been walking in idolatry and rebelling against God, and he gave them all these different chances, and nothing really seemed to work, to where in Egypt he just said, listen to my voice. That didn't work. Eventually he brings them out of Egypt. He gives them a law. He says, follow the law and things will go well. And that doesn't work either. Eventually he gives them negative consequences, like if you don't follow the law, I'm going to do these things to you. Yeah. And that's like what we saw in Deuteronomy. And that didn't work either. And so God kind of said, we're getting to the point where those things that I said were going to happen are going to happen. So y'all are going to go into exile, and there's no escaping this judgment. And then we kind of saw a couple different parables, to where we saw there was this kind of imagery of holy fire on this like forest, and this was talking about Jerusalem's judgment that they weren't going to escape. And then we saw this other thing where Ezekiel kind of drew this like little fork in the road per se, and it was to show Nebuchadnezzar that he was going to attack Jerusalem. And there's like all this talk about like the sword that's turning and fighting and killing everybody, and the idea is again that Babylon is coming for Jerusalem, and there's no escaping it.
Yeah, you really feel a sense that things are coming to a head.
Yeah.
Right, to where the messages are getting more and more urgent and more specific.
Yeah, and as we're going to see in the section today, it's probably going to come to arguably one of the climaxes of the book.
Yeah.
We're going to see that as we get through chapter 24.
Yeah.
But
and that being said, just word of warning.
Yeah.
This is where some of the stuff we're going to be covering today is
graphic.
It's pretty graphic. Yeah, these are the passages that you don't really. If you're like a parent and you're like raising up, if you're raising up a 5-year-old, you probably don't want to read them some of these passages. You won't be seeing artistic depictions of this in Sunday school for sure. But we're adults here. We're going to be mature.
We're mature. Yeah,
chapter 22 is fine, but chapter 23 is the one. Ezekiel 23 is the one that I always like tell people to just like. If you want to be shocked by some of the stuff the Bible says, go read Ezekiel 23. We literally did that at church campus last week. I was telling my kids like,
oh really?
Yeah, they were like,
they were marveling at it, but it wasn't even that bad of a part.
Oh no, there's
like
something.
They were reading verse 32, and I'm like, guys, the worst stuff is in.
Yeah, I think they were honestly so young they didn't understand what was being said.
Yeah.
But because they were like, what should I read? I was like, go read Ezekiel 23, and they read the whole thing, and like it wasn't until they got to the end they were like, oh my gosh! I was like. No, the stuff I'm talking about is like right at the beginning. So, but anyways,
is it as bad as 16?
It's worse.
Yes, it's worse.
Okay.
But again, just even to that point, there's a reason behind the graphic nature of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, because some people might look at this and they're like, oh my gosh, like isn't God supposed to be like righteous and pure? And like, the answer is yes. God is righteous, pure, good, beautiful. He's amazing.
He's also fed up.
Well, yes, but he's also fed up here, and that's part of his righteousness, right? Like the people of Israel have been sinning against him for generations, right? And he has been gentle with them, but they have consistently hardened their hearts and turned away. And so right here, it's kind of like a point where he has to use graphic imagery in order to even like get them to listen. It's almost like, hypothetically, like, I don't know, if I were to just drop like a cuss word in the middle of my conversation, like all of a sudden everybody would just be listening because like I do not typically cuss.
Yeah.
And if I were to just drop an F-bomb, they'd be like, oh, okay. Like, if I was like teaching the youth, and all of a sudden I just said F, they'd be like, all right. They're like, all of a sudden they'd be listening.
Dead silence. Yeah.
Yes, and you have to be very careful because, I would probably never do that. But I trust God's judgment, and there's a time and place for graphic imagery. And we saw that similar like back in like 2 Kings with like Elijah. He was the type of guy who was a little bit more crass as well. But I just say that to point out that it's not our job to cast judgment on God and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe God would do that. It is our judgment to see what God does and submit to him and realize that he knows what is right and wrong better than we do. But
yeah, for sure. Yep. Alrighty, we can probably go ahead and hop in for now. We'll be in chapter 22 of Ezekiel. I'm going to go ahead and read through a certain amount of it, and then we'll talk.
Also, do you need a Bible or anything?
No, I have a...
Okay, cool.
Oh, and if it matters to you to have the same translation, we're using LSB. But
LSB?
yeah, but obviously you can use whatever translation you want. But
do y'all all have LSB?
No, I think we do, but you're using ESV, so you can use whatever you want. But
yeah.
Right. Is that LSB or
LSB? Yeah, it's the legacy standard. It's like a slight like update of like the NASB, basically, just like a few differences. But
then the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, "Now as for you, son of man, will you judge? Will you judge the city of blood? Then you shall cause her to know all her abominations, and you shall say, Thus says Lord Yahweh, a city shedding blood in her midst, so that her time will come, and she makes idols against herself for defilement. You have become guilty by the blood which you have shed, and your day, and defiled your idols by which you have made. Thus you have brought your day near, and have come to your years. Therefore I have made you a reproach to the nations, and a mocking to all the lands. Those who are near and those who are far from you will mock you, you of unclean name, full of turmoil. Behold, the princes of Israel, each according to his power, have been in you for the purpose of shedding blood. They have treated father and mother with contempt within you. The sojourner they have oppressed in your midst. The fatherless and the widow they have mistreated in you. You have despised my holy things, and profaned my Sabbaths. Slanderous men have been in you for the purpose of shedding blood, and in you they have eaten at the mountain shrines. In your midst they have done acts of lewdness. For in you they have uncovered their father's nakedness. In you they have humbled her who was unclean in her menstrual impurity. One has also done what is an abomination with his neighbor's wife, and another has lewdly defiled his daughter-in-law, and another in you has violated his sister, his father's daughter. In you they have taken bribes for the purpose of shedding blood. You have taken interest in profits, and you have injured your neighbors for gain by oppression, and you have forgotten me, declares Lord Yahweh. Now behold, I have struck my hand at your greedy gain which you have acquired, and at the bloodshed which is among you. Can your heart stand, or can your hardened hands be strong in the days that I will act against you? I, Yahweh, have spoken and will act. I will scatter you among the nations, and I will disperse you through the lands, and I will put an end to your uncleanness from you. You will profane yourself in the sight of the nations, and you will know that I am Yahweh. We'll stop there. So, what happens there?
Well, I think we get to see an explanation for why he's going to use certain imagery when you get to chapter 23.
Yeah.
Because basically he's just calling them out for
all their sexual sins.
Well, not even just sexual. There's other stuff too, but
Yeah.
he does emphasize the sexual stuff because I think that gets across the craziness of what they've been up to.
Yeah.
So there's also mentioning of evil business dealings.
Yeah, so
shedding of blood.
there's corruption, there's greed. It says that the leaders have used their power not to help the people, but to shed blood. It says that they've profaned the Sabbath day. So basically just all the commands that he gave them, they just haven't done any of them.
Yeah. Initially, he lists two main things where he mentions the shedding of blood and making idols that have defiled them. But yeah, like after that, he kind of lists out a bunch of different specific things. And I mean, me and David just recently have like gone through the early chapters of Exodus, and this is basically just every single command in that section has been like explicitly lined out and has been broken.
It's as if God's saying, like, wow, I expected y'all to not be able to follow any, or like, I didn't expect you to follow all of them. I didn't think you wouldn't follow any of them.
Yeah.
So where he's basically like, he's listing them out so that the people understand the totality of their, like, you know, sin.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's not just one thing. If it was just one thing, I wouldn't have to be so drastic with my punishment. But no, you've done everything I told you not to.
Yeah.
You've literally, I gave you the law and you did a complete 180.
Yeah, well, and even like what you were talking about in verse 4 where he like highlights two main things. He says, you have become guilty by the blood which you have shed and defiled by your idols which you have, like, what you have made. Like, those are like the two chief sins, and that's because in a way, like, if you were to summarize the entire law, right, it really comes down to like being devoted to God and then being like, I guess what you could describe as like a life-giving person, right? The way that Jesus will summarize it is love the Lord your God and then love your love your neighbor as yourself, right? Where those are two commands from the law, and he says they summarize the whole thing. But the idea is that that's really what it comes down to. Be devoted to God, and in your devotion to God, like, walk in obedience to his commands, and all the commands are about like loving and serving others and not depriving them of life, right? So you're taking care of the sojourner, you're not murdering, you're not committing adultery, you're doing things that actually are good for society and for the world and for other people, rather than just taking for yourself. Whereas he's saying that they inverse that, right? On one hand, they're guilty of like blood, right? And so they're not being life-giving, they're being life-sucking. And rather than giving to the world, they are taking from it. And then they're not being devoted to God, they are being idolatrous. And those two things go hand in hand, like hand in hand. The reason why they're being idolatrous is because they want things for themselves that God is not giving. And so they kind of, and so they're not loving others because they're serving themselves. So
yeah, and say like it's almost like, I guess it's in like Leviticus where it talks about like the different laws for being like clean and also being holy, like to be able to enter God's presence. And here it is kind of like saying like the idolatry is kind of like the violation of like the holiness, and then like the bloodshed is almost like the uncleanliness. To where here it's like God is basically saying y'all made yourselves entirely unclean and unholy, like profaned, and so both of which makes them like unqualified to be in God's presence.
Well, and that's worth exploring a little bit, just because keep in mind we talked about this in the earlier chapters, but Ezekiel is a priest, right? So the whole book begins when he's 30 years old, which is the time when a priest is supposed to be going into duty. Right. But instead of going into duty in the temple, Ezekiel finds himself hundreds of miles away in Babylon, in exile, and so he's like a priest without a job.
Yeah,
and
we also talked about how that was supposed to be like a time of celebration. You become a priest and you're in the tribe of Levi, right?
Yeah.
And how this is pretty much the exact opposite.
Yeah. He has nothing to celebrate, and so again, to go to what you're talking about in Leviticus, the Leviticus like worldview basically categorizes everything in like two binaries, right? To where there is the holy and the common, and there's the clean and the unclean. And holy and common just means like common is not inherently bad, it's just normal, right? Sometimes like they'll translate it as like profane, but I feel like profane like has like a negative connotation to it. Whereas common, it just means like your normal everyday thing. Yeah. Something holy is something that is set apart to God, right? And so Israel was called to be holy. They were called to be a holy nation, to where their whole existence was to be set apart.
Set apart from God and show the world we follow the one true God, and then show the world that they're different because of it.
Yes. And then clean and unclean, we sometimes attach like a moral implication on this, but that's not really what's meant. Like when you read through Leviticus, clean and unclean literally just means clean and unclean, right? So a woman who just gave birth is unclean. A person who touched a corpse is unclean, right? It's not sinful to give birth. It's not sinful to touch a corpse. However, it is sinful to go into the presence of God while still in that unclean state, right? So the idea is that you have to go through this like cleansing ritual in order to go into the presence of God, right? And so basically at any given time, people can be unclean and common, clean and common, unclean and holy, or clean and holy, right? And the only one that can actually go into the presence of God is the person who is clean and holy, right? If you're any of the other three things, you've fallen short in some way, right? And so that's just kind of important to keep in mind, because what Ezekiel's saying here is that they're totally unfit to be in the presence of God, right? They have defiled themselves with blood, which means that they are unclean, and they have chased after idols rather than being set apart and holy to God. So they've become common, like they've become like the pagans around them. And so they are unclean, common, they are barred from the presence of God, hence why Jerusalem is going to be destroyed.
Yeah.
And then he just elaborates and says, you don't believe me? Let me tell you all the things you've done wrong. And then he just like gets more specific.
Yeah.
And that's why we also see God's presence physically leaving Jerusalem in the earlier chapters.
Yes, yeah. Like that was the whole like heartbreaking moment where Ezekiel has this vision and God just leaves the temple. And you're like, ooh.
So rather than them not being able to enter the temple, they were already in the temple doing those things, so God himself just takes the decision to leave.
That's actually like a really good point, because I mean, whenever we get to Leviticus and stuff, the whole point is all these rituals are to allow them to enter into like the tabernacle, right? So the way the Exodus ends is that it says that Moses could not enter the tabernacle because of God's presence there. But then whenever you get to the book of Numbers, it says that God spoke to Moses like while Moses was in the tabernacle. Mm-hmm. And so the whole point of Leviticus is how do common, like unclean people enter the presence of God? And Leviticus answers that. But then whenever you get to Ezekiel, he has this vision of the people in the temple, yet they're worshiping idols and they're doing sinful things. So they have had the audacity to go into the presence of God in an unfit state. And so since they're not willing to listen to him, God says, okay, well, I'm going to be the one who leaves. Yeah. And so he leaves the temple, and the temple's going to be destroyed. which is really sad and
And
heartbreaking.
the thing about that is like some of them are trying to hide it, and God literally takes Ezekiel there, probably in the spirit, and it's like peek through the walls and see what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a phrase here that's repeated 3 times. I don't know exactly what to do with it aside from what we've already talked about, but since it's repeated 3 times, it's probably worth mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
But the phrase "for the purpose of shedding blood," it's verse 6, 9, and 12. So it's like every 3 verses there. But it says, "The princes of Israel have been in you for the purpose of shedding blood, and then a slanderous men have been in you for the purpose of shedding blood, and then they have taken bribes for the purpose of shedding blood." And I wanted to know if y'all had any thoughts there. With the repetition and...
Well, I mean, the repetition just it highlights emphasis.
It
right?
emphasizes the point. So, princes within you are shedding blood, and then people who slander to shed blood. So, one's the leaders, one's by the way of the mouth, and then the other one, 12. The other one is in like business dealings and corruption, and more so like politics, I would say.
Yeah. Well, then the idea is just everybody is after out for blood. What is that? That's cool. That's weird. Yeah, but the idea is everybody's out for blood, which again is not good. Like even before God gave like the Torah, you have to go back to way back like the time of like Noah, and right after the flood, God's like, hey, like no more shedding blood, right? He who sheds blood, his blood shall be shed, right? God does not take that lightly, right? He made man in his image, and he wants them to be respected and treated with dignity. Yet they're shedding blood, and so God's like, this is not going well for you.
Yeah.
And they're all doing it for selfish reasons, right?
Yeah,
they're,
for greedy gain.
Yeah, so you've got the princes who are doing it according to their power, so they're abusing their power. Mm-hmm. You've got the slanderous men who have been doing this in order to engage in their like lewd acts. And it seems like, is that the same group in verse 12?
Yeah, I can't tell, but it's that either that or it's the verse in verse 11 where it says one has also done.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the Hebrew indicates a different person.
But both verses are talking about people doing like lewd actions with people they're not supposed to be doing stuff with. So they're committing adultery, and they're some of them are like incest. So they're just doing really bad stuff. Yeah. And all of it is, it's interesting how he equates stuff like that to being out for blood as well.
Yeah.
To where it's like they're not outright killing somebody, but like he still associates it with murder in a way.
It's just the overall defilement of the pure and innocent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting too, just because you don't usually associate bribes with shedding blood. I mean, there could be like a literal connection where people are taking bribes and it leads to like...
He's just putting a big emphasis on like, taking advantage of others rather than serving others. As being like, if you slander others, you're committing murder. If you're taking bribes and taking advantage of others, you're committing murder.
Yeah.
Your princes are committing murder. Like that kind of
stuff. And if you go back to Exodus, whenever you get like that covenant code, like the initial laws God gives, like to explain the Ten Commandments, like he elaborates and he explains like, well, the reason you don't take a bribe is because that will cause the perversion of justice, right? And what happens when a perversion, like whenever justice is perverted, the innocent suffer, right? And the reason why you need to have honest gains, and the reason why you don't want to like weigh your scales in order to rip people off, is because, well, whenever you do that, the innocent suffer, right? And now you've got like the people who are in need, who are now going destitute because you got greedy. And so, if anything, God is highlighting the true like the end result of greediness and bribery, where like, it's so easy to dismiss it, be like, oh, like, what? I rip people off a few dollars. What is that? And God says, well, that's murder. Because, if you do that to enough people, and if you justify it enough, well, now you're leaving people hungry in the streets. Also, you can have a few bucks. And I think that this is where you get to see Jesus later on in the Sermon on the Mount, where he gets to, he explains, well, yeah, like, you have heard it said, do not commit murder, but I say to you, if you've called your friend fool, you've already committed murder in your heart. Like, he's just pointing out that it was never just about murder. It was about all the things that, if left unchecked, lead to murder, right? And it's all about just showing respect to people and forgiving them and not taking advantage of them.
And serving them.
Yeah, and so in many ways, like, Ezekiel's just kind of he's following that same train of thought that's going to lead to Jesus saying those things.
Yeah, it's getting to like the heart of the law.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, again, this kind of goes in line with what we've been talking about throughout the entire book, which is this constant theme of the failure of leadership to protect the people.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about the fact that the people in leadership are sinning; it's what happens to the people below them too. So it isn't just that they're suffering; it's that the people below them are being killed, and they're literally being killed, and they're also suffering as a result. There's no one there to protect them. Anything else? So after all that, the last part of this section here, what does God say? Can your heart stand, or can your hands be strong in the days that I act against you? I, Yahweh, have spoken and will act.
Well, I like the imagery of can your heart stand? Because I think there's I don't know if this is how an ancient person would have read it, but from a modern perspective, there's almost like a dual meaning there where the idea of your heart standing is like the idea is like he's saying he's going to send judgment and they're going to be so terrified that they're going to tremble, right? Like their heart's going to quake, right? Their hearts won't be able to stand. But on the other hand, the imagery of a heart standing is the idea of like defending itself, right? To where he has laid out all these accusations and basically it's saying like, will your heart be able to stand before me? Like, to where even if with their actions they have done these things, in their hearts they have. You know, like, to where I don't know if that dual meaning is being communicated like in the original text, but from a modern perspective, you could read it from both angles to where it's like...
Yeah, I could see that.
Like, will your heart be able to stand before my judgment of you, or will your heart be able to stand whenever I send the armies after you? Right? To where it's like fear or condemnation or something like that.
Yeah, and I can see that with like the hands being strong too, to where it's kind of like a literal and a less literal meaning of like, can your hands will literally grow limp because you're like, growing in fear of what's happening like around you, but also like, can your hands stay strong like before God?
Yeah.
Like, can you stand before God with a clear conscience?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else?
Well, the main thing is that he says, I will scatter you among the nations, I will disperse you through the lands, and I will put an end to your uncleanness from you. So, like, there's a goal behind all of this, right? He's wanting to put an end to the uncleanness.
Yeah.
And he's wanting to make them holy. And we already, like, this is going to be explained further later on in Ezekiel, but, like, we've already seen hints of the idea that he says, I'm going to make a new covenant with you, and I'm going to make you my people, and I'm going to put my law on your hearts. Yeah. And that's eventually where, like, we're going to pick up stuff in the New Testament. But y'all can talk for a second. I wanted to look up the word in Hebrew in verse 15. Just because there might be a connection to a previous book.
The uncleanness, or?
No, the word for scatter, actually.
Oh, okay.
I will scatter you among the nations. So I agree. I think it's can be read as a twofold meaning. Like, can your heart stand against my covenant and my laws? And can you be judged as pure, which in this case it would be no. And then furthermore, it could be also elaborating on the point that can you stand against my judgment? And no, because I'm going to scatter you and wipe the uncleanliness from you.
Mm-hmm. So the word for scatter here is not the word I was looking for, but the word for disperse is. Okay. To where it says, I will disperse you through the lands. If you go back to Hosea, right? Hosea was one of the earlier prophets, and he was writing to the northern kingdom before the northern kingdom was destroyed, right? Whereas Ezekiel was writing to the southern kingdom hundreds of years later. Mm-hmm. But in the first chapter of Hosea, God commands Hosea to go marry a prostitute and have 3 kids with her. And the 3 kids, their names have different meanings. And one of the kids' name is Jezreel. And that means scattering. That's from the word Zara. It means like to scatter seed, right? Because that's what the word seed is, Zara. Mm-hmm. And he says that he is going to scatter the northern kingdom like seed. And it's a pun because the northern kingdom, right through the middle of it, is like the Jezreel Valley. And so the kid is named Jezreel, and so God says, I'm going to scatter you just like you scatter seed in the valley. But by the end of the chapter, he says that in the future, Israel will look back on this day, and they will say, great is the day of Jezreel. And the question becomes what do they mean by that, right? Are they just saying great as in that was a really important day? Or are they looking back on it in a positive way? Where, in the end, they're saying, I am so glad God disciplined us. Because in the end is what brought us back to him. Yeah. And I think the answer is yes to both, right? To where it was an important day, and it was an important day because through his discipline he brought them back. And so I just think it's interesting that that's what Hosea said to the northern kingdom hundreds of years earlier, and at this point they have been scattered. And now you've got the southern kingdom, and Ezekiel is telling them the same thing, right? You are going to be dispersed. And in the end, they will look back on this as a really important day as well. So, I mean, even to this day, the Jewish people commemorate the fall of Jerusalem in 586 BC and stuff. So, kind of cool.
That is true. Anything else?
I mean, the last thing was just the phrase, you will know that I'm Yahweh, that just calls back to the Exodus.
Yeah.
Right? That he consistently says that throughout the book of Exodus to say, the reason he sends the plagues is so that they will know that I am Yahweh. So, here they are, a millennium after the Exodus has taken place, and they're still learning the first lesson they were supposed to learn. It's like a kid who is a senior in college, yet he's still being taught basic mathematics. It's how did you get here? And be purely by the grace of God.
Yeah. Well, I guess for them it probably is important, especially because of all the idolatry they've been committing, to where it's they actually need to know which one is Yahweh after all.
Yeah, they've cheated on their metaphorical husband so much that they forgot what he actually looks like.
Yeah. Okay. We can go ahead and probably move on. Yeah. I'll just go ahead and read to the end of the chapter. And the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, the house of Israel has become a dross to me. All of them are bronze and tin and iron and lead in the furnace. They are the dross of silver. Therefore, thus says Lord Yahweh, because all of you have become dross, therefore, behold, I am going to gather you into the midst of Jerusalem. As they gather silver and bronze and iron and lead and tin into the furnace to blow fire on it in order to melt it, so I will gather you in my anger and in my wrath, and I will lay you there and melt you. And I will collect you together and blow on you with the fire of my fury, and you will be melted in the midst of it. As silver is melted in the furnace, so you will be melted in the midst of it. And you will know that I, Yahweh, have poured out my wrath on you. And the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, say to her, you are a land that is not cleansed or rained on in the day of indignation. There is a conspiracy of her prophets in her midst, like a roaring lion tearing the prey. They have devoured lives. They have taken treasure and precious things. They have made many widows in the midst of her. Her priests have done violence to my law, and have profaned my holy things. They have made no separation between the holy and the profane, and they have not made known the difference between the unclean and the clean. And they hide their eyes from my Sabbaths, and I am profaned among them. Her princes within her are like wolves tearing the prey by shedding blood and destroying lives in order to get greedy gain. And her prophets have smeared whitewash for them, beholding worthless visions, and divining lies for them, saying, Thus says Lord Yahweh, and Yahweh has not spoken. The people of the land have practiced oppression and committed robbery, and they have mistreated the afflicted and needy, and have oppressed the sojourner without justice. And I searched for a man among them who would build up the wall and stand in the breach before me for the land, so that I would not bring it to ruin. But I found no one. Thus I have poured my indignation on them. I have consumed them with the fire of my fury. Their way I have brought up upon their heads, declares Lord Yahweh. Okay.
Well, he brings up the clean, unclean, holy, and profane thing.
I saw that.
I didn't even read ahead, so.
So I guess there's kind of two main sections here, but the first section, which would be 17 through 22.
It's talking about. I'm a little confused by this section. There's a lot of reference to metallurgy here, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of reference. So Israel's become dross to me. All of them are bronze, tin, and iron, and lead in the furnace. So those inherently, to me, are less. They're still somewhat desirable metals, but they're less desirable. And silver, in comparison to those four, is more desirable.
Yeah. So we're actually going to have a couple of sections, a couple of little passages in our section today. They're going to have this whole melting and stuff going on here. Do y'all know what dross is?
Isn't it like this leftover stuff that people don't like from the metal?
It's like the stuff on the outside, like all the undesirable stuff.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know entirely if it'd be this, but like, have you ever seen like a video of someone like doing like smithing or like just smithing, and you see like the outside, like whenever they're like hammering it, you see like the crust, kind of this like crust stuff fall off. It's like the unusable metal. It's like bad. If you Google silver dross, you'll see this like ugly stuff like on the outside of it, and so usually the way that you get the dross out though is through extreme heat. And so basically you have to like super heat treat the metal to get the dross out. It's like it's just the nasty stuff in there. And so the intention is that you get the dross out, you melt it out so that you get a more pure metal.
Yeah.
And so it's basically what refining would be.
Yeah. And he says that he's going to gather them into the midst of Jerusalem and basically turn Jerusalem into one big fiery furnace.
Yeah.
Which is not great imagery if you live in Jerusalem.
And then he's going to hammer them out, and they're going to be scattered like the dross when you hammer a sword.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea is he's going to purify them. But he says that they're mostly dross, and so most of them are probably not going to make it out. But
yeah. The reason I say that is because I think the word melt in 21 and 22, it's going to pop up again in the next section in 24 with the pot analogy or like metaphor, parable. And I think there is a similar thing going on here to where just God basically has to like he has to expose them, like he has to expose the metal or this pot to like extreme amounts of heat in order to like purify it.
Yeah.
And they both kind of have a similar thing going on there to where like he has to burn all the dross out. It'll probably help us understand also, because chapter 24 will be a little bit confusing with that.
Yeah.
But
yeah, because I just didn't know what dross meant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then verses 23 through 31. He literally just brings up the different categories of the whole clean, unclean. This translation translates it as profane. I'm not a big fan of that. Like,
is it the same word?
Yeah, it's the same word. I guess here's the thing: is like, to me, a better understanding is holy and common, because holy is like set apart to God, and common is literally anything else. But I guess profane works in this instance because the idea is that it's something that is meant to be holy, but they have made it common. And so that is an act of profaning something, But like, I still think that the word common is like a better understanding of the term itself. But what they are doing here is they are profaning something holy by making it common. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
If you're supposed to be devoted to God, yet you live for the world, you're living in a common way, but in so doing, you're profaning yourself. So both work. I just I think that profane is like too much of a negative term that like it makes it sound like something's inherently bad, whereas like what they're doing is bad, but like God does not condemn the nations for being profane. Because they're the nations, right? They don't know better, right? They just are common, right? The issue is whenever Israel lives like the nations, right? So whenever that which is devoted to God makes itself common, that's when we got an issue.
I think he does condemn them.
Well, he condemns them, but not for that. Like, he condemns them for like more general sins. Like, he condemns them for their evil and their unrighteousness, but not just like he doesn't condemn them for not being devoted to him, because from their perspective, they like the nations don't know Yahweh, right? It is Israel's job to live for him so that the nations can know him, if that makes sense. Like, does that make sense?
I think when I look at something like Romans 1, verse 23, where he's talking about like, me by the clouds in the sky.
Yes.
So I do really like what you're saying with like how they're taking something holy and making it common, and that act is profane.
Yeah.
But I would say that, and if you look at something like Ecclesiastes, where you kind of, by considering God, the Trinity, as the God of Christianity as the ruler of the earth, and being aware of that, you make it holy.
Yeah.
So
I guess I'm not gonna like jump too far because I don't want to say anything that's wrong.
Yeah.
But like, you know, the New Testament says, I think in Matthew 18 or something, like the sin of the world is unbelief.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So like it is definitely like the Bible does make it clear that the nations are condemned for their sin, and like Romans does make it clear that yes, like God has made His invisible attributes known to everybody, to where all of us are condemned for unbelief. But I guess what I'm more like talking about like a more nuanced thing of like the specific sins that the nations are condemned for are sins that are more understood to all people, whereas like God never gets on to the nations for not keeping the Sabbath because they didn't know about the Sabbath, right? The Sabbath was a specific sin, not sin. It was a specific command that the Israelites were given to set themselves apart as holy. If that makes sense, right? So I'm just saying that the nations, by definition, were common, right? Like that was just like that was just by definition their status, and so that's more what I was kind of addressing there. But they are definitely condemned, and so I was more just saying that like the thing that God condemns them for is a little bit different, to where that's why He like holds Israel of even like greater responsibilities. He's like, I've revealed so much to you, and you've actively departed from it. If that makes sense. But
I think,
yeah.
And so I can't really even think of anything else to like to make my point off the top of my head. Probably Paul, something Paul. Just like the phrasing, like commonplace. I feel like I've always read it to mean like negative.
Yeah.
And so I because you're trying to say like that they were commonplace, so since it was common, that doesn't mean it was bad.
No, I'm not saying it's not bad. I'm saying that the term itself is a neutral term in like the Bible. Like so, where like whenever you have like let me just think about like a robe, right? Like in the Torah, right? It says like, okay, you will make this robe, and you will make it holy, right? The idea is like you're like the robe in and of itself is not a moral thing. It is just an object that is common. But then he says you are going to go out of your way to set it apart to God, right? So I'm just saying that specific term is a neutral term. But I'm not like this is me just being more like a I guess particular about like a very specific term in the Bible. Whereas I'm not saying that it's like saying that like the nations are neutral or anything like that.
Okay.
I'm saying that the very specific term that shows up that is like in Hebrew the word is halal. Like that word is not a it's not a negative word. It is just a neutral like yes, this is a normal thing, but Israel was called to make it holy, right? And their issue is that they have not done that, and so for them, that's profaning it. To where they're doing a negative thing because they're failing to obey God. If that makes sense. Yeah. Like, I hope I'm explaining that well, but yeah, it's whenever you get to the New Testament, it's different because you're dealing with like the letters of Paul are primarily written to the like Gentile people, and so the language he's using is going to be a little bit different than like in the Old Testament, which is written to like the Jewish people. If that makes sense. But
yeah, here's kind of it's pretty much like you could almost say it's like a summary of previous chapters, but there is kind of this like breakdown of like different people, like different leadership positions, what they've been doing wrong. And so we talked a little bit about the priest just now, but like I guess first was in verse 25. What does it say that the prophets are doing?
Not their job.
Well, they're tearing up human lives, and they're not serving the people. They're not trying to draw the people closer to God by serving them. They're in fact doing the opposite.
Yeah.
They're actively harming the people they were sent to serve.
Yeah.
They're taking.
Yeah.
And I guess there is like it mentions prophets again in verse 28, where it says they smeared whitewash, beholding worthless visions and divining lies for them, saying, "Thus says Lord Yahweh," when Yahweh has not spoken. This was also like. Was it 2 Kings or is it? No, I guess it'd be 1 Kings with Elijah. Yeah, it'd be like the end of 1 Kings, like with the whole Was it there prophets of Baal that were disguised as prophets of Yahweh, or were they just false prophets, like
I
false?
don't know what story we're talking about yet.
At the very end with I think it was Ahab with Micaiah.
Oh, with Micaiah, it doesn't specify. It just says like, so basically like you have these two kings, like a king from Israel, king from Judah, who are wanting to go off to war.
Yeah.
And one of the kings is like, well, hey, let's talk to some prophets and let's see what God's will is. And it says they brought like a bunch of prophets, but it doesn't specify who they were prophets of.
Okay.
It just says they brought forth prophets. And then that's whenever the one king is like, are there any prophets of Yahweh we can talk to? Which is like it's almost like he's like, okay, these guys are not what I meant, right? So the idea is that they're probably pagan prophets, but it just never specifies, right? They're either pagan prophets or they're people who are presenting themselves as prophets of the one true God, but by their counsel, it's very clear that they're not.
They're not.
Yeah,
And so that's when they get like Micaiah to come out, and he's like the sarcastic prophet who he's like, oh yeah, if y'all go off to battle, y'all are gonna win. And the king's like, tell me the truth. And Micaiah's like, oh yeah, you're dead. And he's like, I knew it. Like, but yeah, so I think I can go check, but I'm pretty sure that it just doesn't specify.
Yeah, and like that was just one of many examples of again, whether they were prophets of Baal or false prophets of Yahweh.
The thing with the false prophets, right, is they're always going to tell the king what he wants to hear. So if the king wants to go off to war, they're going to be like, oh king, the Lord says you will prosper in your battles and he will deliver the enemies into your hands.
Yeah, they're always going to talk sweet, talk a big game.
It just says that he gathered the prophets together.
Okay.
And they said, go up, for the Lord will give into the hand. But even the word for Lord there is not Yahweh. It's Adonai. So it's like...
Is it
like
Lord with a lowercase l in your translation?
Well, no, it's just not the word Yahweh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just, oh yeah, go up, for Adonai will be with you. And that's where the king's like, hold up. And then he says, is there not a prophet from Yahweh we can talk to?
Yeah. And then we already kind of talked about with the priest, but again, with the priest here, he says, the priests have done violence to my law and have profaned my holy things. They have made no separation between the holy and the profane, and they have not made known the difference between the unclean and the clean, and they hide their eyes from my Sabbaths, and I have profaned among them.
And
So
not even to kind of mention here, I'm not even sure if all these priests he speaks of are from the tribe of Levi.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
yeah, we wouldn't know for sure.
No matter what, they're not, like, they're quite literally not doing their job. Like, the definition of a priest is, like, to distinguish between the holy and the common and the clean and the unclean. Like, that is, like, 95% of their job.
They're like
Right,
the
like-
chief mediators between God and the people. So if they're not doing their job, then the people who are maybe trying to serve God well literally can't, because the priest is like, yeah, that sacrifice is fine when it's totally like, unclean.
Well, yeah, it's like that's literally, like, 95% of their job is distinguishing between those things. And if you don't distinguish between them well, you can offer a sacrifice, but it means nothing. Right? If you offer an unclean sacrifice, if anything, it's just going to make God mad. Because it shows that you actually don't care about what he wants. What's that? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like you said, they're like mediators between... They're like, as Israel is to the nations, the priests are to like the rest of the nation of Israel. To where it is their job to like make everyone know what the law is. They're almost kind of like the law of, like, I guess not the enforcers, but they're the informers of the law.
Great job of that they did. They didn't even find the law until Josiah.
That's got to be so embarrassing, too. It's like... Sorry, that's like a tangent we probably don't need to spend too much time on. But, like, the idea is that, like, the whole, like, government of Israel is supposed to be, like, governed by, like, the Torah. And it just, like, went missing for several decades, or for, we don't even know how long.
Yeah.
And then, like, all of a sudden one day they're, like, digging through the temple and they're like, hey, we found this, like, scroll. And, like, I just gotta imagine, like, the king's like, so what have you, whenever I've asked you for counsel, what have you been telling me? Like, have you just been, like, pulling stuff out your butt? Like, it's just, that's just so funny to me. Like, it's not funny, because it's, like, that's absolutely terrible. And it says, like, they've not been being faithful to God. But, like, it's funny in hindsight. Looking back, you're like, so the government was just, like, guessing at this point. They're just like,
oh. What makes it even funnier is that they wouldn't have had the law during the time of Hezekiah. So his faith is entirely, like, a work of God.
Yeah.
It's just like, no, I am making this king in particular faithful to me because It serves me, and also I need this kingdom to survive at least a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Because it would look bad if they fell at the same time as the other one.
Yeah.
That's true. I just like how that verse starts off by him saying that the priests have done violence to the law. So it's like it's kind of along the same lines of like this all the bloodshed, where it's almost like he's saying they shed the blood of the law, to where it's like not only are they not protecting the people, but they're also not protecting God's law either.
Kind of going back to Kings, it's kind of wild. They lost track of the law for that long up until Josiah.
Yeah.
Yep. And then again, verse 27, your princes are like wolves, tearing the prey by shedding blood and destroying lives for greedy gain. So again, the people in leaderships like the kings, the nobles, they're not looking out for the people either. The people have practiced oppression, committed robbery, they have mistreated the afflicted and needy, and have oppressed the sojourner. So again, this is all stuff that the law has, like, pretty much what the entire law outlines is how to not do these things. It is how to...
You don't even have to get deep into the law. It's like, these are like the earliest commands he gives. Like, it's just... Yeah.
Yeah. Like, not just the Ten Commandments, but right after that, where it's like all the slave laws and all of the property things.
He's like,
they're
I'm
all
not
about
even
protecting...
talking about cleansing leprosy. You literally just have to read the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
It's right there.
But yeah, like all those are about protecting. They're all about different ways to protect people or property, or both. And they're not doing any of that. In verse 30, I searched for a man among them who would build up the wall and stand in the breach before me for the land, so that I would not bring it to ruin. This calls back to chapter 13, verse 5. This is what makes me think of to where...
this also calls back to Sodom and Gomorrah.
I would kind of agree with that, but explain that.
So Abraham, right, he praises like, God, if you spare the city, if there's, 50 people, spare it. And God's like, there's not 50. He's like, if there are 30, spare it. And God's like, there's not 30. If there are 10, spare it.
Yeah.
There's not 10. If there's 1, spare it. There's not even 1. Right, just spare 1.
Yeah. He's basically saying Jerusalem has become as corrupt as Sodom and Gomorrah, and there's not even an Abraham who's willing to step up here and try to defend them to me. Like, and even with Abraham's story, despite all of Abraham's intercession, like Sodom and Gomorrah still went up in flames, right? But at least there was somebody who was willing to try. But God's like, yeah, there's nobody who's willing to come to their defense. But then it also calls back to chapter 13, which is what you were talking about.
Yeah, with the lying prophets. He says, your prophets have been like foxes among waste places. You have not gone up into the breaches, nor did you build up the wall around the house of Israel to stand in the battle on the day of Yahweh. And it just talks about, again, how they are beholding like worthless, lying divinations. They're saying that God says this when God hasn't said anything. And so, again, it's all about the leaders need to, like the idea is like a breach in the wall. It's like people, like, I think we talked about this before, but people would come into, like, go into the breach to like defend the city.
Yeah.
And then they're also, not only are they not defending the breaches, but they're also not like building up the wall. So it's like they're not protecting against invasions, but they're also not like preparing for them.
Well, we described it like they were just putting plaster over the walls and acting like everything's fine.
Yeah.
Right. Like they're just like they're covering up the hole, be like, there's no problem here, and it's like you just covered a stone wall with plaster. Like, I think that's a weak spot now. They're like, no, it's fine. God's with us. He wouldn't destroy us. And it's like, just like prosperity preaching, but in the ancient version of it. God's like prosperity preaching sounds good unless God is trying to communicate to you that you need to repent and judgment is coming, in which case it is literally the last thing you need to hear. And you need to hear a little bit of hellfire and brimstone. But,
That's true.
I had a question, and I haven't read the rest of the book, so it's probably a really simple answer, but I always thought like this Son of Man thing, like that was like referring to Jesus.
That's just the title that Ezekiel like refers to himself by.
Yeah, so the title Son of Man, it's only really used twice in the Old Testament, and it's in Daniel and Ezekiel. And in Ezekiel, it's like a very common thing where like almost every chapter, God just calls him Son of Man, Son of Man, Son of Man. But in Daniel, that's where you have this vision where it says, like, I beheld one like a Son of Man riding on the clouds of heaven. And that is the title that Jesus picks up for himself. But it is kind of weird because you read through here and it is thrown around quite a lot. But in Ezekiel, it's a much more just like common, like, I'm not totally sure why God calls him that. Like, because it's not like this is the first man God's ever talked to.
Yeah.
Is there like a different translation from the Greek or Hebrew from Daniel versus Ezekiel here?
It's difficult to say because Daniel chapter 7 is written in Aramaic, so it's not written in Hebrew. So it's like no matter what, they're just like there's only a few sections of the Old Testament that are written in a different language, and Daniel chapter 7 is literally like the final chapter of Daniel that is written in Aramaic rather than Hebrew, and so they are technically two different terms. But then the New Testament's written in Greek, so like,
Yeah.
But it's very clear whenever Jesus uses it, it's very clear that he's referencing Daniel.
Yeah.
But I would say that I would say Jesus is actually very, like, being very clever when he ever uses that term, because it creates this like ambiguity in regards to how he's using it. Because if everybody knew right off the bat that he was using it in the Daniel sense, he would have been killed way earlier. But instead, it's very possible he's just using it in the Ezekiel sense, in which case he's just saying, I'm a dude. But then it really builds to a climax at his trial, whenever he's standing before the high priest, and the high priest says, tell me, are you the Messiah, the Son of God? And Jesus says, you said so. And behold, I tell you, you will see the Son of Man riding on the clouds of heaven. And so like in that moment, he clarifies, whenever I've been saying Son of Man, I haven't been using it in the Ezekiel way. I've been using it in the Daniel way. I am the one who rides the clouds, who will inherit all the nations and judge the earth. And next time you see me, I'm going to be judging you. And that's why the priest rips his garments and says, this man's committed blasphemy. So I think Jesus is just being clever, to where he uses a term that could be interpreted as, I'm just a man. But it also could be interpreted as, yes, this is the divine Son of God who will rule and reign over everything.
Yeah.
And so I think that he's being very clever in why he uses that term. And so I think that's just like the genius of Jesus there, because, yeah, if he was just going around calling himself Son of Man and everybody immediately knew, oh, he's talking about Daniel, like, the priest would have been like, all right, let's kill this guy right now. But instead, it's like, he wasn't going around saying, hey guys, I'm God in the flesh. He was using a term that could imply that, but it also could imply literally the opposite. And it's not until literally he's on trial that he clarifies what he means. And so, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I don't think we talked about that in our study of Ezekiel yet, but...
I guess technically we probably haven't, huh?
Yeah, but I've always thought that's really cool, because like Jesus is just like a genius. Like, there's not a term he could have used that is like better for that. To where it's like he's literally like... I just love it, because in the moment whenever he's on trial, he is intentionally like condemning himself to death. Because the priest didn't even ask, are you God in the flesh? He said, are you the Messiah, the Son of God? And Son of God is just another term for the Messiah, right? Because God said he would be like a father to David's sons. And so if Jesus had just said yes, the trial would have just kept going. But instead he says, I'll do you one better. I'm God in the flesh. I will ride on the clouds and rule over all things. And like, that's when the high priest's like, all right, kill him.
That's the point of no return, yeah.
Yeah, and so it really is a really cool thing. Like, I love that Jesus, like, that's his favorite title for himself, Son of Man. To where everybody's like, what does he mean by that term? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to keep you guessing. But anyways, sorry, back to this. But
no,
that's a good question.
Well, I still think it's pretty interesting, because if you just like for fun pretend that Son of Man in Ezekiel means Jesus, then like at the first, like you're reading it says, now as for you, Son of Man, will you judge the city of blood? Then you shall cause her to know all her abominations. So I was just kind of like rereading it with that context, and it I don't know, it just like
that would be interesting, just because I mean, I guess at the very least you could say that Jesus functions in a Ezekiel-like manner, because he is the prophet who, whenever he shows up, he also predicts the destruction of Jerusalem, and he also lives out this like sacrificial life, to where like he is almost like another greater Ezekiel.
But wasn't it like people thought he was like the resurrection of Ezekiel?
Elijah.
They thought he was the resurrection, like Elijah and stuff. But in the text, it is like if you go to like the beginning of chapter 23, it says the word of Yahweh came to me again, saying, Son of Man. So it is him talking to Ezekiel. Yeah. But I think the language is, I mean, it probably isn't accidental that it also is applied to Ezekiel, so that Jesus is saying that he is functioning in like this Ezekiel-like manner, which also makes sense because later on, whenever Jesus like institutes this new covenant, well, that's exactly what Ezekiel promised, where he said,
Yeah.
God's going to give you the Spirit. And so there is at least like consistency with that.
Yeah. Just like how Ezekiel is kind of like a second Moses, Jesus is also kind of like a second Moses and Ezekiel in a way.
He's the third Moses, second Ezekiel,
Yeah.
fourth Elijah, fifth, I don't know.
Second
Third.
Yeah.
Just to kind of reiterate, people would confuse Jesus with Elisha because of John the Baptist being at like wearing hairy garments that were unusual for the time period.
Yeah, people just, nobody knew what to make of Jesus. They're like, who is this guy? It's almost like
Well,
all of human history has been building up to him.
I think it's more so that like people were expecting Elijah to return reincarnated because he never died.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah, but that's getting a little bit off track. We can talk about that after Bible study.
All right.
Yeah.
But just for the sake of getting through Ezekiel.
Just like how apparently some people think John the Apostle's
Okay, again, hey, you're getting us distracted. Talk about after Bible study. After Bible study, we can hang out and talk about that then. All right.
Yeah.
That was for you, Tim.
Yeah, so that's and then the last
You're
verse.
silent for the next 10 minutes. All right. Go, Sean.
Then we get to the last verse. Thus I have poured out my indignation on them. I have consumed them with the fire of my fury. Their way I have brought upon their heads. And so this kind of, again, calls back to the earlier verses about like with the dross, where it's like he has consumed them with the fire of his fury. And so he's going to judge them. But it's going to be to refine them and to discipline them. Anything else for this chapter before we move on?
We probably need to speed up a little bit if we're wanting to get to chapter 24.
It's kind of what I'm thinking, because 23 is a long
Yeah,
chapter.
and it's 8:15. So,
Alrighty.
bring it on.
Well,
Not the graphic stuff.
No more side tangents, Nick.
how far do I want to read through 23?
I'll take a
Thanks
little
for
bit.
finding an answer to a good question. You're over here bringing up John the Apostle still being alive, okay?
I apologize. I started that.
It's alright, I entirely blame you as well. I'm kidding.
Okay. Alrighty, well, we can start reading through 23, and I will figure out where to stop as we go.
Alright. Buckle up, everybody.
The word of Yahweh came to me again, saying, Son of man, there were two women, the daughters of one mother, and they played the harlot in Egypt. They played the harlot in their youth. There their breasts were pressed, and there their virgin bosom was handled. Their names were Oholah the elder, and Oholibah her sister. And they became mine, and they bore sons and daughters. And as for their names, Samaria is Oholah, and Jerusalem is Oholibah. Oholah played the harlot while she was mine, and she lusted after her lovers, after the Assyrians, her neighbors, who were clothed in purple, governors and officials, all of them desirable young men, horsemen riding on horses. She gave her harlotries to them, all of them the choicest men of Assyria, and with all whom she lusted after, with all their idols she defiled herself. She did not forsake her harlotries from the time in Egypt, for in her youth men had lain with her, and they handled her virgin bosom and poured out their harlotry on her. Therefore I gave her into the hand of her lovers, into the hand of the Assyrians, after whom she lusted. They uncovered her nakedness. They took her sons and her daughters, but they killed her with the sword. Thus she became a despised name among women, and they executed judgments on her. Now her sister, Oholibah, saw this. Yet she was more corrupt in her lust than she, and her harlotries were more than the harlotries of her sister. She lusted after the Assyrians, governors and officials, the ones near, magnificently dressed, horsemen riding on horses, all of them desirable choice men. And I saw that she had defiled herself. They both took the same way. So she increased her harlotries, and she saw men portrayed on the wall, images of the Chaldeans portrayed with vermilion, girded with belts on their loins, with flowing turbans on their heads, all of them looking like officers, and the likeness of the Babylonians in Chaldea, the land of their birth. And she saw them and lusted after them, and sent messengers to them in Chaldea. So the Babylonians came to her to the bed of love, and defiled her with their harlotry. Then she became defiled by them, and her soul became disgusted with them. And she uncovered her harlotries and uncovered her nakedness. Then my soul became disgusted with her, as my soul had become disgusted with her sister. Yet she multiplied her harlotries, remembering the days of her youth, when she played the harlot in the land of Egypt. She lusted after their paramours, whose flesh is like the flesh of a donkey, and whose issue is like the issue of horses. Thus you longed for the lewdness of your youth, when the Egyptians handled your bosom because of the breast of your youth. She will just stop there. All right, let's break it down.
A little reference to bestiality near the end there.
I don't think that's a reference to bestiality. That's the imagery of bestiality used to describe just.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I should word that differently, but
before we get there, just kind of again starting it off. So he describes there being, or I guess, what does he describe at the very beginning?
there were two women, the daughters of one mother.
Yeah, and their names. Oholah just means her own tent, and Oholibah means my tent and her. And that's probably referring to like the fact that the Northern Kingdom had like their own thing going on, whereas the temple was in the Southern Kingdom.
Yeah, so like Oholah would be, Oholah is the one that means her tent,
Yeah.
right? So that'd be the Northern Kingdom of Israel.
Mhm.
And Oholibah, which is my tent in her, would be the Southern Kingdom, because the Southern Kingdom is where Jerusalem was at. That's where God's presence was at, and so the idea is like God made his home in Jerusalem in the Southern Kingdom.
Yeah.
But then whenever the Northern Kingdom split off, they kind of created their own religion, and they had, you deal with this in like First and Second Kings, where they had the golden calves in in Bethel and Dan,
Yeah.
and they had their own priesthood and stuff like that. So that would be what that's referencing. But,
Yeah. But yeah. So there's these two women, there's two daughters, and what happens with
well,
them?
real quick, it says whenever it says the child of one mother or the daughters of one mother, is that just referring to just the nation of Israel as a whole?
I would assume so.
Like, so they were both descended from a unified nation?
That's what I would assume.
Okay.
I mean, I guess it mentions them both being in Egypt, but it could just be saying that like because they both come from Israel, which was in Egypt.
Yeah.
Well, I was wondering, because it said they played the harlot in Egypt. Was there ever a time when the Northern Kingdom ran down to Egypt for help? Because whenever we think of Egypt, we immediately think of the Exodus.
That's true.
But other references in Ezekiel to Egypt have been referencing more closely to
I think
the Southern Kingdom actually asking Egypt for help.
No,
Yeah,
was
for
that
Babylon.
there was right whenever I think it was in Jeremiah, right?
But Jeremiah's right to the Southern Kingdom as well.
yeah, I think
We're talking about the Northern Kingdom.
I think in like that middle section of Isaiah, it does mention something with
Oh, yeah.
Egypt. It may have been just an oracle against them. It may not have been
Yeah.
an oracle against the like an alliance, but
Yeah.
I think that may be possible. They may have had an alliance, or they may have tried to make an alliance against Assyria or something.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I
But-
do think I remember there being something in Isaiah though about like Assyria and Egypt, where like they fought against each other. I think, and Assyria crushed Egypt or something.
Okay.
I can't remember for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, but I was just wondering if maybe it's not referencing the Exodus, it's referencing them, because that would be the whole idea of them playing the harlot. The idea is that even after God had removed them
Mhm.
from Egypt, they went back. And the idea is that they went back to Egypt looking for help. But,
That's true, and that probably would make more sense because there's not really much else here that dwells on like the earlier history of
Yeah.
Israel. Everything else is really about Assyria.
yeah, the whole idea is that Oholah is just cheating on God, right? Playing, like, the imagery is of harlotry, right? That's what I'm saying. Ezekiel 23 is pretty intense because, or it's not even that intense, it's just more PG-13, right?
Yeah.
Because it's very intense, or probably more rated R, because it's a lot of like sexual lewdness. Like that's the imagery that God uses to depict it, and that's because
Yeah.
God made a marriage covenant with Israel, right? He's supposed to be their groom, and they're supposed to be his like wife. And they're just cheating on him all the time, and they're chasing after other gods, and they're chasing after other nations. And basically the whole premise of this chapter is that Oholah did it first, right? And that's because if you look at their history, the Northern Kingdom was the first one to embrace idolatry. The Northern Kingdom was the first one to make covenants with foreign nations. But in the Southern Kingdom should have looked at the Northern Kingdom's failure and God's judgment of them and should have said, we're never doing that. But instead, they joined in the sin of their sister.
And they got worse.
Yeah, and they just made it even worse. And so they multiplied their harlotry, and they like by the end of the Southern Kingdom's time, it says that there's like shrines on every hill and under every tree, and they're making covenants with all sorts of pagan nations. And so rather than learning from their big sister's failure, they just multiplied the failure and became even, I don't know, more popular prostitutes, I guess. I don't know how you would word that correctly.
Yeah, I guess kind of like that, yeah.
I'm pretty sure Israel tried allying with Egypt when they were like under siege of the Assyrians.
Oh, that would make
And the
sense.
Egyptians were just like, nah, you got it.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, it's something like that. There's also a lot of imagery here about the Assyrians, about like how impressive they looked too. I guess, yeah. Say, I don't think it says it about Egypt, but mostly Assyria. But either way, there is like a lot of this like royal imagery of like all these impressive looking people in like their uniforms and like they're on horses. And again, this really calls back to a few different books, but there's just this whole thing of, you know, man always looks to like the outward appearances, and so, you know, they don't see God, and they don't like, but whereas they see these nations with their really impressive, you know, dress uniforms and their palaces and their wealth, and so they're always being tempted to go to these people for like alliances and to save them, whereas, I mean, all they really needed was the fact that God told them earlier on, if you just trust in me, everything will be fine. And that was like the whole message of Isaiah was, you know, to the kingdom against Assyria, was he said, I am with you, just trust in me and you won't need to rely on like political alliances. And so no matter how impressive these people look, they're nothing at all.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the whole thing was like, the human heart has this tendency to like look, I mean, it's kind of insidious, but we look at other people and we want to see how they can benefit us.
Yeah.
Right? So Israel, they look at Assyria and they're like, oh wow, look at how big and mighty Assyria is. We want to be friends with them because they can help us be strengthened. And they don't look at all the different ways where they could be polluted. First off, practically speaking, these big people can turn on you easily, right? Yeah. But also there's the paganism and there's all the corrupt things they do that they're just overlooking because, ooh, shiny Assyria. Right? And Judah did the same thing to where that was what you were talking about with Isaiah, where Isaiah's like, don't like, there was this time period when, what was it? I think Syria and Israel were marching against like Judah, or they were trying to force Judah into like an alliance against Assyria.
Yeah.
And instead, Judah was like, no, I'm going to ally myself with Assyria. And Isaiah's like, no, just trust in God, right? Like, if you just trust in God, he will deliver you from both of them. And Hezekiah ends up listening to that. But Ahaz did not, right? And so there have been these generations of failure because we're impressed by shiny stuff. And that'd be true even nowadays, right? I mean, like, think about it. If, like, some celebrity were to walk in the room right now, we would not hesitate for a second to do our best to impress them, right? Like, I don't even like Taylor Swift. But if Taylor Swift came in, I'd be like, oh, let me clean up the house real quick. Let me, like, make you a dinner. Like, I would do something to try to impress her just because she's famous. And that's terrible because it's like the only reason I would do that is because I think that she has something to offer me because, you know, but it's like,
wait. That was, I really liked that observation and I want to like maybe have another second. It's like, you know, I at school, I have a lot of friends who are Muslims, a lot of friends who are Catholics, Mormons, a lot of different religions. And I had this one guy who's Muslim, who's who I'm pretty good friends with, and we were having some conversation about the gospel, and it got pretty heated. And he, so now at the point where I'm being angry and I'm not being loving, he tells me, he says, you know, if you really want someone to see the love of Christianity, you should invite me to your house, invite me and my wife to your house, make a meal for me. And the church, one of the churches that I go to at college, College Station, they started a program. I didn't join it because I'm home for the summer, so I don't exactly know what it is, but the idea behind it is like, you know, a lot of time we as Christians tend to, especially in College Station, tend to keep to ourselves. And the idea is to try to go out and meet strangers and invite them to your house. So I think so. Like you said that, and no, I think everything you said is true.
Yeah.
But I think there's a degree of like, I think there's a point of where it's loving, where whoever enters that door, we want to.
Well, and that would be a good point, right? Because the thing is, what I was more highlighting is more, I would respond to her different than like if some other random stranger came in.
Yeah.
Right? To where if some, like really, I should like if I responded the same to everybody, that's just me being loving.
Yeah.
But knowing my own heart, if they were like, hey, by the way, Taylor Swift's going to be at your house in 5 minutes, I'd be like, hey guys, can we like just pause the Bible study real quick and just clean up everything? Whereas if they just told me, hey, some random person's about to show up, I'd be like, all right, cool. And that says something more about my heart, right? To where we should be loving to everybody, open to everybody, and we should be willing to, we don't want to just be friends with Christians, right? We need to be reaching out. But what I was pointing out is we have this tendency, whenever somebody's like bigger and more popular and has more than us, we have this tendency to want to impress them without even stopping to think about what the negative side effects could be of becoming their best friend, right?
Yeah.
To where it's like it really isn't about loving them at all. It's about using them to serve ourselves and not thinking about how that could backfire, right? So I was more like saying like a personal example of like what they did with the Assyrians, to where, you should be nice to the Assyrians. You should love them. You should serve them. But that's not what they're doing. They're looking at the Assyrians and they're like, ooh, we want what they have. And they're lusting after them. They're not like, and they might have even cloaked it in like, oh, well, we're just doing the loving thing. But it's like, that's not what you were doing though. And God's exposing their hearts. He's like, no, you were lusting after what they had. Right? And like, if a homeless person walked in my house and I treated them the same way that I treated Taylor Swift, that would suggest I'm a loving person. However, if I treat Taylor Swift differently, that suggests that I wasn't doing it out of love. I was doing it out of this desire to use her to serve myself, which is first off not loving towards her, and it's also very foolish and ignorant for me, because that means that, we have no reason to believe that she is like a God-fearing Christian, and so it means that I'm doing whatever it takes to impress her without considering the fact that that might come at the cost of certain integrity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's what I was going for there, but we should absolutely be like reaching out to people, and that's why like later on the Bible's like, don't show favoritism. But that's because that's what the human heart naturally does.
Yeah, and you mentioned Hezekiah earlier. I think on top of that, with Hezekiah, you see that like initially he does trust in God, but then later on he does the whole thing where he shows that the treasury is to Babylon, and you can say the same thing. Like he ends up trying, he ends up kind of becoming his own undoing because he's trying to like impress them.
He's trying to impress, Where
he's like showing them all that he has, and what he ends up doing is he shows them exactly why they should take over. Take over Judah. Sorry, like, boss, what we were talking about. Yes, so with the two women here, like they are both, like the whole like harlotry thing going on is that they are not trusting in God, and that they are looking and they're almost getting like their standards are too low. They're getting way too impressed by things that they shouldn't be impressed by. And especially when you consider these are the people like that had, the whole Exodus and everything that God did for them back when they were originally in Egypt. Considering all that God's done for them up till this point, which would include the Exodus, then you had the whole wilderness wanderings, the tabernacle, the whole kingdom being built, the temple being built, and yet they're being impressed by like shiny uniforms. And that's, again, if you're making like the marriage analogy, which it's talking about like them being adulterous, it's like, I don't even know like to make the best comparison, but it's like literally like cheating on your wife with like someone who's not even that impressive. Like they're a downgrade.
Well, the imagery is that like God is like, this is kind of weird, but like he is like this perfect gentleman who is in like perfect physical condition, treats her amazingly, gives her everything she ever needs, and all he asks for is her devotion. And then she cheats on him with like some homeless dirtbag who literally just like had a nice golden watch on. And he also stole the golden watch, by the way. What is this? Like it is the biggest downgrade, and it's literally just her getting distracted by this like something so stupid. It's like God's like, did you not see all the things I promised to give you and all the things that I have given you? and then you get distracted by their purple robes. It's like, oh, okay. It's like, but it really shows how little of you they have of God.
Yeah.
But again, we're guilty of this because we do this on a daily basis, right? Where we get distracted by the shiny, stupid stuff, and we fail to trust in God to provide for our needs. And keep in mind that the things that He wants are way better than the things that we chase after. So it's easy for us to look at them and be like, they're just playing the harlot, and it's like, oh well, I guess I do too, which is not good.
Yeah, we get way too easily impressed by what like the world has to offer.
Yeah. Hence why we would try to impress Taylor Swift if she came over.
Yeah, or like whoever it'd be. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel bad. I'm just like kind of like attacking Taylor Swift. I'm not trying to. She's probably a lovely lady.
It's funny.
Did y'all read that thing where it's like her like Taylor Swift produces more like carbon monoxide poisoning than like do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh no.
It's like 100 times more carbon monoxide poisoning than the average person.
Well, back to what I was saying. Forget her. No, I'm kidding. That's funny though.
Anyway.
Yeah, so whenever it gets to Judah, it says that, like, she just multiplied it more and more. To where it says, verse 20 is like that's where you get like the very strong language.
Yeah.
She lusted after their paramours, whose flesh is like the flesh of donkeys, and whose issue is like the issue of horses. We're all adults here. I don't think I need to explain the imagery going on there. But the idea is like it's supposed to gross you out, right?
Yeah.
The idea is like, yeah, it might be impressive if you think about it for a second, but then if you think about it for 5 seconds, you're like you're cringing. You're like, oh, what is this? And that's how you're supposed to, like, that's how God feels about Judah in this moment, right? That's why He's using the language, because He's like, yeah, you might view this as simply, oh, I'm just going to make a covenant with the Babylonians or the Assyrians, or I'm going to chase after their gods. And God's like, let me just tell you what it actually is. You are cheating on the God you pledged yourself to, and you are selling yourselves quite literally. Like they are giving over, like they're making covenants, right? That is literally selling themselves into the hands of these people, and they're worshiping these other gods. And a lot of times, worshiping these other gods included doing very lewd acts, right? There was like cult prostitution and all this terrible stuff, to where in the previous chapter it talks about like even the sexual sins they were committing, to where they are quite literally selling their bodies even by participating in idolatry. Yeah. And so it is supposed to gross you out, to where for them in the moment they're probably thinking, oh, this is what you got to do to, like, you know, keep the gods happy. But God's like, yeah, you notice how I don't ask you to do that type of stuff? Like, and it's just supposed to highlight how disgusting it is.
Yeah.
To where He literally says, therefore, Oholibah, thus says the Lord. So I've been sick for like the last week, in case you were wondering. I don't regularly just like hack my lungs out. Behold, I will arouse your lovers against you, those with whom your soul was disgusted, and I will bring them against you from every side. So, like the ones that they even got disgusted of and turned away, He's like, I'm going to bring them back and they're going to destroy you. So.
Yeah. So like right before verse 20, because I know we need to move on a little faster, but 17 and 18, it said, like, to make it even worse, it says that they, like, the Babylonians and them came together in the bed of love, and he defiled her with their harlotry. Then she became defiled by them, and her soul became disgusted with them. And I can't help but think like there's kind of a twofold thing going on here, to where on one hand it probably is some degree of like disillusionment, where it's like these people didn't offer them what they were hoping for, and so like her soul became disgusted because they didn't offer the salvation or prosperity that they were hoping they would find in them.
Yeah.
And then again, I guess to go more like with what the metaphor is, like it almost makes you think of like the story with like Amnon and Tamar, to where like
better bring that up.
You were gonna bring it up?
Yeah.
Okay. To where that's like when 2 Samuel 13.
Yeah.
To where the whole thing is that he, I mean, without giving too much context, basically what Tamar is.
They're both David's children.
They're both David's children, right? And so Amnon, does he pretend to be sick, or is he?
No, he pretends to be sick. So Amnon is one of David's sons.
Yeah.
Tamar is one of David's daughters, and Amnon was like severely attracted to Tamar. Keep in mind, they're not full-blooded siblings, but it's still weird, right? Still not a good thing to do. And he was like lusting after her, to where he pretended to be sick. Oh. And she was like, he asked for her to take care of him. And then whenever they were alone in the room, he basically violated her. But then immediately afterwards, he's disgusted with her, and he sends her out, and he hates her. To where it's like but that's the classic thing of like how sin works, right? Like once you enjoy the sin itself, it becomes disgusting, and so like that seems like what it happened with Babylon as well, to where they played around the idolatry and the stuff in harlotry, and then they realized, you know what, you're not as good as God, but then like they still didn't learn the lesson. They just went to another nation and another god.
And again, if you go back to like just again like that same section, like you would contrast that like with David and Bathsheba, to where like after that happened, like what made David different was that stuff didn't drive him away from God. It actually like he was able to go turn back to God
in the end.
It
drew him away from God for a bit.
That's a fair point.
Yeah,
but he eventually repented and came back to God, and he also, to be fair, he also wasn't worshiping like other gods.
Yeah.
But still, whereas again here, it makes it even sadder because it's not only that, but it just says that it says she uncovered her harlotries and uncovered her nakedness, but then she multiplied her harlotries, remembering the days of her youth. So it's like she's still thinking back to like the good old days, despite being like disillusioned with the present. Like it's just like a very sad.
Well, I think this is supposed to be very sad because, if anything, the sadness of it has been lost on our current culture, because nowadays virginity has become something that's like more of a surprise than like the average couple nowadays, like outside of like Christian circles and even sometimes in Christian circles, people don't expect for people to like wait until marriage, right? Like it's like virginity has become like a thing of the past. It's outdated. That's how they talk of it. And so nowadays you've probably lost like even some of the freshness here, but even then you still feel the sadness. But in an ancient culture, it was like, even in like pagan societies, generally, primarily for women, but it was like, no, it'd be unthinkable that you like lose your virginity before marriage. Like that was like a prized thing that you hold on to where the way that you refer to an unmarried woman is as a virgin, right? Because those were just equal. But the idea is that you've got this like these two daughters, and they feel the need, like in order to win the love of these men, like they feel the need to disrobe themselves, and like that's why the imagery is sad, because it's like it's quite literally like a woman who's looking for love in all the wrong places, to where even nowadays we feel bad for like a woman who, if she's young and maybe she feels pressured by her boyfriend and she does this thing that she can never like really take back, like we feel bad for that even in our current culture, which treats virginity lightly. But like if you like rewind back to like when they actually took sex seriously, it's even more heartbreaking. Like the idea is, it should be reserved for marriage, yet here they are just disrobing for every nation and every god and revealing their nakedness. Like, and the idea is that it's not even like the nations are forcing them; it's they're doing it of their own will, right? It's not like the nations are violating them. It's that they're offering themselves to the nations out of this like desperate act to like earn their love, and it's really sad because it's like they have this God who loves them and who would be their faithful husband if they would just be faithful to him. But instead, they're so distracted by the world that they're just giving themselves to everything else, and it's just very heartbreaking imagery.
Yeah. Well, especially when you consider that they originally did have like they would have had the sense of like satisfaction that God provided back in their early days, to where it's kind of like a whole lost cause, to where like it seems to me like part of what like the whole thing is going for is like they're trying to like get back to that same feeling, to where it's like they remember the days of their youth. It seems like they're trying to get back to that same like feeling, like it's that same like kind of love. The thing is like it's literally not obtainable.
Yeah. They forgot who gave it to them. It was like your husband gave that to you. But,
so they're never going to be able to find it.
Yeah.
In Deuteronomy, one of the things that really stood out to me is like Moses says, like one of the key things in like when he's going to die is that he wants to pass on is to teach the fear of the Lord to your children, and teach them to teach it to their children. And so that's what I feel was really lost. And for you to like it says like they forgot about him.
Yeah.
How are you gonna be like Israel and forget about God?
Yeah. Yeah. The consistent lesson of Scripture is that discipleship is hard. Like,
yeah.
I mean, even David, man after God's own heart, he's a terrible father. Like to where whenever you look at his kids, like Solomon does a pretty good job for a bit. But even then, Solomon ends up learning the wrong lessons from David. And instead of having 9 wives, he has like 700 and 300 concubines, and then like he turns to other gods, and then all of David's other children are just like rebellious, and it's just like faithfulness is always one generation away from extinction. And so that's why, like, in the New Testament, Jesus is like, go make disciples. Like, it's very important that you we can't just be content to be satisfied in being faithful followers ourselves, right? And that's one of my biggest concerns for like the current church, because especially in like our Protestant circles, we've made it all about, am I saved? Like, is my eternity secure? It's like, okay, you're just thinking about yourself. Like, the whole goal is like most people go to church nowadays because they want to be encouraged, but it's like, well, no, like we go to our church to serve one another and like to equip one another to serve God, and to to help everybody else. And like that's why we do like Bible studies and stuff, because it's not just about me and my own personal growth. It's about us and helping pass it on to future generations. That is it's a challenge, and But anyways, I'm gonna let you be out here, but. We can probably move on.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're getting to chapter 24 today, Sean. It's already 8:45.
Yeah, probably not. Okay. Anything else I want to add before we move on?
I'm putting this up here so he doesn't knock it over.
That's probably a good idea. Okay, I'll go ahead and read through. Therefore, O Oholibah, thus says Lord Yahweh, behold, I will arouse your lovers against you, those with whom your soul was disgusted, and I will bring them against you from every side. The Babylonians and all the Chaldeans, Pekod and Shoah and Koah, and all the Assyrians with them. Desirable choice men, governors and officials, all of them, officers and men of renown, all of them riding on horses. They will come against you with weapons, chariots and wagons, and with an assembly of peoples. They will set themselves against you on every side with large shield and helmets. And I will give the judgment to them, and they will judge you according to their judgments. And I will set my jealousy against you, that they may deal with you in wrath. They will remove your nose and your ears, and your survivors will fall by the sword. They will take your sons and your daughters, and your survivors will be consumed by the fire. They will also strip you of your clothes and take away your beautiful jewelry. Thus I will make your lewdness and your harlotry brought in the land of Egypt to cease from you, so that you will not lift up your eyes to them or remember Egypt anymore. For thus says Lord Yahweh, behold, I will give you into the hand of those whom you hate, into the hand of those with whom your soul was disgusted. They will deal with you in hatred, take all the fruit of your labor, and leave you naked and bare. And the nakedness of your harlotries will be uncovered, both your lewdness and your harlotries. These things will be done to you, because you have played the harlot with the nations, because you have defiled yourself with their idols. You have walked in the way of your sister. Therefore I will give her cup into your hand. Thus says Lord Yahweh, you will drink your sister's cup, which is deep and wide. You will be laughed at and held in derision. It contains much. You will be filled with drunkenness and sorrow, the cup of horror and desolation, the cup of your sister Samaria. You will drink it and drain it. Then you will gnaw its fragments and tear your breast, for I have spoken, declares Lord Yahweh. Therefore, thus says Lord Yahweh, because you have forgotten me and cast me behind your back, bear now the punishment of your lewdness and your harlotries. We'll stop there. So, what happens there? Starting off in 22.
Starting from 22. He's
Yeah,
essentially going to
basically
turn.
just promising judgment against Judah for all the things that they've done, and like twisting all of the ways that they've sinned against him against them.
Yeah.
Like how he describes using their lovers against them, and all the things that they coveted being used against them and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's almost like in the first half, he was, I don't know if I say it was sarcastically, but he was like describing how like impressive the people from like Assyria and Babylon looked, to where it's like, all the uniforms and the horses and stuff. And it's like, now he's saying it's almost, he's kind of turning it back on them to where it's like, now like all that impressiveness is now going to be against you. So like now you're going to look up and you're going to see all this amazingness, but like they're coming up against you.
Yeah. It's like, you shall be in awe, full of awe, but at a terrifying time.
In the King James version of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it didn't really mention it as much in this section as it did back in chapter 16, where it talked a lot about like them adoring themselves to like attract lovers.
Mm-hmm.
But here it mentions like how they're gonna also like plunder them, to where like they're gonna take all the things they have. Like it's not gonna stop at they're gonna take their like their where does it start? It says their noses, their ears, their survivors, their sons, their daughters, your clothes, your jewelry.
It's like all the things you treasure most will be taken from you.
Well, there's this dark twist to it, because the idea is like they made themselves naked, like metaphorically, for the nations and stuff to win their favor.
Mm-hmm.
But as a result, they're being judged by being made naked, like by being stripped of all their possessions, right? So
That's fair, yeah.
they were willing to give whatever it took in order to make these nations and gods happy. And so now God is sending those
That's
things in
why
judgment
I
to
was
strip them of
saying-
everything.
That's why I was saying that it's a lot like the God's using the ways in which they sinned against it and twisting it and making it like that's the way in which I will judge you.
Yeah. You were willing to give gold to make Assyria happy? All right, well, I'll send Babylon to take all your gold. And
In a way, it's kind of like the girl invites 100 guys over to sleep with her. They all sleep with her, and then after they're done sleeping with her, they come and ravage her house and leave.
Well, and also the idea is like, I mean, if a girl has 100 guys over, just to go with the same metaphor, there's going to be some very negative consequences of that. Because all of a sudden, also if he gets like too close, just push him off. He'll be fine. But there's going to be some transmitted diseases going on there.
Yes.
Right? And there's going to be consequences of that. And the idea is that Judah's going to feel those consequences, right? They're going to feel the full brunt of what they have coming towards them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What verse did you stop in?
30,
39?
35.
35.
That way it wasn't like 30 verses again.
Yeah, dying. But this is why we couldn't film the podcast today.
Yeah.
But the idea of giving the cup into the hand, it says you have followed. Wait, what is it now? You have walked in the way of your sister, therefore I will give her cup into your hand.
Well, we use the image of God's wrath in the form of a cup a lot,
Yeah.
right? Like, you shall drink from the cup of my wrath. So it's referring to the same cup her sister drunk from, which will refer to you're going to drink from the same cup the northern kingdom drank from.
Yeah, I was mainly going to highlight the New Testament. Like, that same imagery is going to be picked up later by Jesus, where, he talks about, on the night he's arrested, he's saying, like, Father, if it's possible, let this cup be removed from me.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, not as I will, but you will. But even earlier than that, you got, like James and John, like the like some of his disciples, they come up and they're like, "Hey, Jesus, can we sit at your right and left hand?" Well, I guess technically it's their mother who comes and asks that. But and he says, "Are you able to drink the cup that I drink?" And they're like, "Of course we can." Like, just totally not reading the room that a cup is not a good thing to drink. And he says, "Well, that's good, because it's not up to me who sits in my left and right hand, but I can promise you, you're going to drink the cup." And so James is like the first apostle to die for his faith, and so it's like, ooh, yikes. No, like James is the only one whose death is actually mentioned in the Bible. But yeah, so I thought it's interesting that like right here there's the imagery of two sisters drinking the same cup. You get to the New Testament and you've got two brothers drinking the same cup.
That's true.
But there's a spin on it, to where here they're drinking the same cup of God's wrath as punishment for their sin, whereas James and John will drink the cup of like persecution out of faithfulness, because they will follow in the same way as Jesus and will suffer for it. So I think it's kind of an interesting contrast. But
yeah, that's true. I guess I wasn't even aware of that. That's pretty cool. But yeah, in verse 29, they will deal with you in hatred. Again, it kind of makes you think of what we talked about a second ago with the earlier verses, with the what was it, like 17, 18, to where it's like there's like this mutual sense of like hatred, to where it's like initially Judah's like soul is disgusted with these people, but now it's like these people are dealing with them back in hatred.
Yeah.
To where like yeah same thing, like is kind of mutual there. And then also in verse 27 says that he will make their lewdness and harlotry in the land of Egypt to cease from you, so that you will not lift up your eyes to them or remember Egypt anymore. So again, like we mentioned earlier, like this is so that he can actually like make them clean.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then like, it's not good whenever like God starts like spitting bars. But like
Yeah.
verses 32 to 34, he just starts speaking like poetry.
True.
And then it's like like, I mean, it's good whenever he's like saying happy things, but whenever he's like saying like judgment, and then he just starts like rhyming, it's like, oh, he's just going for it right here. But
Yeah.
you will drink your sister's cup, which is deep and wide. You will be laughed at and held in derision. It contains much. You will be filled with drunkenness and sorrow, the cup of horror and desolation, the cup of your sister Samaria. You will drink it and drain it, and you will gnaw at fragments and tear at your breasts, for I have spoken. I don't know why. This is probably because I'm a Harry Potter nerd, but for some reason, that whole thing right there reminds me of. Y'all remember? Have y'all all seen Harry Potter or like read the books?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like like Half-Blood Prince, like Dumbledore drinking the like drinking from like the poison. Like that's almost what I imagine here. Like because like he's going like even in the books, like he's going through it. Like he's being forced to drink every last gulp, and just like he's sweating, he's freaking out, and like this guy who's normally like all calm and composed, a shell of a man, and it's like genuinely terrifying because you're like, oh my gosh, I've never seen this guy like this. That's kind of what God's describing here. It's like, oh yes, Judah, my lovely and prized possession, the apple of my eye. I'm gonna make you suffer, and you're gonna drink every last drop. It's like, ooh, that's scary. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That was a stable toy.
Yeah, he rips through him quite a bit. There's it's missing a foot, and the scarf is somewhere. I think we threw it away.
I don't have too much else to say in this section, but and then I guess in verse like 25, it made me think of or really just that whole section where it just talks about them like taking. Again, it made me think back to like 1 Samuel, how like Samuel describes how like the kings are going to be, like the future kings for Israel will be, where it's like they're going to take.
Yeah.
I kind of got like the same. There's a lot of like the same language here, where it talks about like taking like their sons and their daughters and like their like.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing.
Well,
to
it's
like
because the Israel wanted a king that was like the nations, and now they're getting a king of the nations.
Yeah.
Who will oppress them, hold them in exile.
Yeah.
And
This is
they'll
how.
get to see like how that truly is, and they'll be like, oh, maybe we should have kept God's commands the whole time.
God's like, don't ever say I didn't give you what you asked for.
Yep. That is actually especially true here, just because the way that God elsewhere describes it, that He is kind of like putting Nebuchadnezzar over
Yeah.
Israel, like as their king.
I love that speech by Samuel.
We don't have to read the whole thing.
No, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I
Just gonna
just
say.
want to go back and read it for myself because it's awesome.
Dude, I love the Bible. We just read it.
Yeah, true.
In the beginning.
We go through the whole Bible. I don't want to be here a long
Yeah.
time.
Oh, it's so shall read the whole thing. It's fine.
Are you pulling up to actually read some of it?
No, he is not. He is
Okay.
doing it to read it himself.
Okay.
We can read it later.
Yeah. I was just making sure. Anything else? So that was through verse. What did I say? 35.
One thing I want to look up, verse 35. I imagine the word for forgotten there is the word like what Nasa, like word for Manasseh.
Oh yeah, probably.
The whole idea is freaking Manasseh.
Yeah, Manasseh.
I was going to bring that up earlier when y'all were talking about like how quickly it takes for,
Didn't it mention Manasseh directly somewhere here? Maybe
No.
that's where-
But this is actually a different word. This is the word shaka.
Yeah.
Ah.
But to where it was like, oh, it's important to make disciples because it's easy for faithfulness to like be lost through generations. And I'm like, well, yeah, look what happened after Hezekiah.
Yeah, that's true.
Friggin' Manasseh.
But no, the imagery in verse 35 really is like striking. Because you have forgotten me and cast me, like the word for cast is literally like to throw. Shalak. It's like,
Yeah.
like it's like you have ignored me and you've thrown me behind you. Like that is, it's not good whenever God can tell you, His chosen people, that that's what you've done to Him.
Yeah, that's true.
I've been like, so lately, like in my personal reading, I've been in like Revelation like 2 with like the 7 letters to the churches.
Yeah.
And like some of the stuff Jesus says to those churches, I'm like, man, I would hate to be the recipient of that. Like, I don't know. Like churches, like we always like think, oh yeah, if Jesus showed up, he'd be like happy with us. I don't know. He doesn't seem super happy with the church's revelation. Like some of them, he's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna come at you and I'm gonna spit you out. It's like, that's scary imagery. But the reason why he does that is because they've done stuff like this, to where, like, the idea is, yeah, you might call yourself Christian, but you have literally just ignored me and thrown me behind you. It's like, what? Oh, you go to church on Sunday and you think that's what makes you Christian? No, that's what gives you no excuse for not living like a Christian. It's like, it's like you can go to church on Sundays and read your Bible. That doesn't mean that you're listening to God. Like, that means that you have no excuse for ignoring Him, right? And yeah, I don't know. That language is like, I mean, these are people who have been like, they've had the Torah for hundreds of years, and God's like, yeah, you've ignored me and just thrown me behind you. It's like, yikes.
It's like, it's active. It's not just like not listening.
Yeah. No, it's like they're actively like, he's here. He's like trying to yell in their face, and they're like, nope. It's like, that's not good imagery. But.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go ahead and read through the rest of the chapter, and then we'll discuss. Moreover, Yahweh said to me, Son of man, will you judge Oholah and Oholibah? Then declare to them their abominations. For they have committed adultery, and blood is on their hands. Thus they have committed adultery with their idols, and even caused their sons, whom they bore to me, to pass through the fire to them as food. Again they have done this to me. They have defiled my sanctuary on the same day, and profaned my Sabbaths. For when they have slaughtered their children for their idols, they entered my sanctuary on the same day to profane it. And behold, thus they did within my house. Furthermore, they have even sent for men who come from afar, to whom a messenger was sent. And behold, they came, for whom you bathed, painted your eyes, and decorated yourselves with ornaments. And you sat on a splendid couch with a table arranged before it, on which you had set my incense and my oil. The sound of a multitude at ease was with her, and drunkards were brought from the wilderness with men of the common sort. And they put bracelets on the hands of the women, and beautiful crowns on their heads. Then I said concerning her who was borne out by adulteries, will they now commit harlotry with her when she is thus? But they went into her as they would go into a harlot. Thus they went into Oholah and to Oholibah, the lewd women. But they, righteous men, will judge them with the judgment of adulteresses, and with the judgment of women who shed blood, because they are adulteresses, and blood is on their hands. For thus says Lord Yahweh, bring up an assembly against them, and give them over to terror and plunder. The assembly will stone them with stones, and cut them down with their swords. They will kill their sons and their daughters, and burn their houses with fire. Thus I will make lewdness cease from the land, that all women may be chastised and not commit lewdness as you have done. Your lewdness will be requited upon you, and you will bear the sin of worshipping your idols. Thus you will know that I am Lord Yahweh. Alrighty.
It's really, this whole chapter is almost like a case against them, where like he personifies Israel and Judah like literally two women in the congregation of Israel, and he's almost judging them according to the standards of Torah.
Yeah.
To where if you go into the Torah and it was like if there were literally two women in the congregation of Israel who were caught doing these things, their punishment would be death by stoning, where you get them all together and the assembly is called to stone them to death.
Yeah.
But now God's like doing a twist on it to where it's the nations themselves who are the daughters, and it's Israel and Judah who are the daughters, and the surrounding nations have kind of become the assembly of Israel.
Yeah.
Who are stoning them to death. And that's kind of like foreshadowing this idea that God is almost like going to the Gentiles for a bit, Like that's
the age of Gentiles.
I think it's interesting that God, the whole chapter is basically one long parable about Israel and Judah, but he states he explains what the parable's meaning is throughout it.
Yeah.
So he's not even allowing them the time to reflect on it and be like, oh, what could God mean? It's like, nope, this is you, and these are all the things that you have done, and this is how I'm going to punish you for doing them.
It's basically an allegory with annotations.
Yeah.
He's just like, here's this, and it represents this. And yeah, but the imagery here, it gets very explicit with it's almost like describing, if I was understanding it correctly, the imagery of like the daughters like preparing themselves to be given over to the men, right? To where it's like they hear that the men are approaching, and so they basically just like make themselves really pretty, and it sounds like they're trying to make themselves look kind of sexy. Where like they've got like all the ornamentation on, they've got like this nice bed, and they're reclining on the bed so that whenever the men come in, they just like basically they're literally being a prostitute, right? They are literally functioning like a definition prostitute in this moment to be desirable. And then it says that the men just like went into them, but just used them, basically.
Yeah, I guess like in the more literal sense, you could say this could almost be like a political thing where it's like all the different like people coming like from afar. But like in the sense of the extended metaphor, it's almost like an orgy, where it's like all these people coming and like at least, but all surrounding around one. Yeah, either that, or it's almost like them lining up or something. Yeah.
It's like the whole thing Barnacle did.
We're not getting into that. Okay.
But
sorry.
But either way, the idea is at the very least there is this idea that it's like a big party of revelry, but it's like a little more than it's kind of like a big party of debauchery and stuff. Yeah. Like it's like they're all rising up to play as like what it says like earlier in like Exodus or whatever. Yeah. But, which again is very crass language that like people like. A lot of people, I feel like, would just be embarrassed to even consider the idea that this is like a holy God using this imagery, but it makes sense, right? Like you can't look at Israel's history and say this isn't what they've been doing, right? He's just, like he's just calling them out for it, and he's like, I've been gracious with you, and it's time for me to just like be very blunt. This is what you've been doing, and so he's using crass imagery to get it across to where, I don't know, if he used like a watered down imagery, it wouldn't stick with you so much. Whereas like, I don't know. If you just like tell a person like, hey, you just sinned against God and like slap the wrist, they're gonna be like, oh, okay, I guess I won't do it again. But then they'll just do it again. But if you say, hey, you're being a prostitute against the Almighty, that's gonna stick with you a little bit more. You're gonna be like, well, I don't want to do that, And ideally, you would just respond to the slap on the hand and stop sinning. But after a while, you might need to use a little stronger imagery to get the point across. Yeah, like the verses before, it mentions how they like entered their sanctuary on the same day after like slaughtering their children, and that like if you're comparing that to like the metaphor part of this, like it is almost like they're like it's exposing like their adultery for like it's like whenever they enter the sanctuary, God can like smell the scent of like a different man on them. Yeah, where it's like I can like he can just like smell it and they've like defiled themselves, and it's like it's the idea. They go and it doesn't really mention necessarily idols, but like it's like they worship one God, and then the same day they go and worship like go to his temple. Well, what he specifically ties it to is profaning Sabbath. Yeah. But like the thing is, that's where we have to remind ourselves like what the Sabbath day is really about. Yeah. Because when we think Sabbath day, we just think taking time off. Whereas like we've talked about this in previous weeks and stuff, but like in the ancient mindset, they weren't looking forward to days off like we do. We look forward to days off because we just want to like treat ourselves and like take some downtime. Whereas in an ancient time period where you did not have air conditioning and electricity and refrigerators and stuff, you couldn't take for granted that you had food preserved for you for the next week, right? No, you had to work day to day to make sure you had food on the table for your family and stuff. And so taking a day off was not like a thing that you were like chasing after. You felt this need to provide, and taking a day off was like a potential day where you went without food. And so God was saying, take a day off and I will provide for you. So he was trying to give them something good so that they would like, he's saying, I'll provide for you. You don't have to rely on yourself. And so in profaning the Sabbath, what they're doing is they're saying, we do not trust in God. We are trusting in ourselves, or more likely in another God, right? Like, because a lot of the pagan gods, like the main gods of like the region at that time are storm gods and fertility gods. Yeah. Why? Because you need storm gods to give you rain for your crops, and you need fertility gods, not only for children, but for crops. And so like the main gods of that time period are for those. And so they'd be like, the reason why they would not be observing the Sabbath is because they felt the need to work in order to provide. Yeah. And what they're doing is that they're not trusting in God, and they're trusting in these other gods who do not give them Sabbath days, if that makes sense. So like, that's why he equates those. He says, you entered my sanctuary after you profane the Sabbath. And so the idea is like, I can smell the scent of other gods on you. That's not exactly great. Because again, you're not supposed to enter the sanctuary
in a common or unclean manner. They're
Yeah.
supposed to be set apart to him and clean.
Yeah, and to make it even worse, I don't know what you just said there. Not only are they not like setting themselves apart to enter his presence, it's like then you continue on to where it talks about then like bathing, painting their eyes, and decorating themselves with ornaments, and like having a table arranged with like incense and oil. Some of that language actually like is almost imagery of like becoming clean, to where it's like they're not willing to do that for God, but they're willing to do it for these other people. To where like they're making themselves clean to stand before like all these different people at a party. And it mentions this multitude at ease, and drunkards were brought from the wilderness with men of the common sort. And so it isn't just that it's like even like royal dignitaries. It's like it's basically just anyone who's willing to come from afar to come and have fun. To where these people aren't willing like they're not willing to do it for God, but they're willing to do it for anybody else to make themselves ready for them.
Yeah, with God, they'll profane the Sabbath, they'll sacrifice their kid to other idols, and then they'll just go in the sanctuary like it's nothing. But for the other nations, they are dolling themselves up, making themselves look pretty, laying on this fancy bed, and like trying to be appealing. And it's like,
Yeah,
I don't know, it's like
very sad.
that'd be like the idea of, like, I don't know, if Brienne and I went on like a date night, and she just like, oh, sorry, I'm just gonna like pick on you here because you're the only girl. But like if I'm the groom, right? So if I was like in God's place here, and we went on a date night, and I dressed all up and stuff and looked nice because we were going somewhere fancy, and she just wore like sweatpants and like just nothing else, like well something else preferably, but like like just dressed like really like I don't know, like we were just like chilling out at the house.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, like we were just going out in a place where there were going to be just like I don't know, we're walking through the streets of Houston, where there's going to be like a bunch of like homeless people or something like that, and she wants to dress up to impress the homeless people. It'd be like, wait, seems like your priorities are wrong here, right? Again, I really don't care if she dresses up if we go on a date night, but like the imagery would be that, right? Like dressing like a slob to go on a date with your husband, but then like really dressing up to impress like some homeless people you might encounter. It'd be like weird priorities there. If that makes sense, like that'd be kind of what's going on there, but.
Yeah.
And then,
sorry, it's kind of like just the same thing I said earlier. Just like that's why I was confused earlier, because like I don't think there's anything wrong with like trying to impress people if it's like for the sake of God.
Oh no, yeah.
And so.
Yeah, but we always have to. That's where you always have to examine your heart and ask, why am I doing these things? Because it's also easy for us to deceive ourselves into thinking we're doing something for God when really we're doing it for ourselves as well. Yeah. And so we always have to be very careful and say, okay, am I treating this person different because I want something from them, or am I genuinely doing it just because I love them? And that's why, like, when you get to the New Testament, it makes a big deal of like taking care of like widows and orphans, because in the ancient time period, that's the people who have nothing to offer you, right? Widows and orphans, like, those are the people who all they have, like, they had no money or anything to give you. All they had was to receive. And so that's why the New Testament's like, no, take care of those people. Because if you take care of them, you're not doing it for selfish reasons. You're doing it because you genuinely love them.
Yeah.
Whereas, and that's why, like, that's like in James, where he says, he gets on to them for showing favoritism to the rich. Because he's like, yeah, like, you might be saying you're doing it because you love them, but you're really doing it because you want their favor. That doesn't mean you shouldn't show favor. Like, it doesn't mean you shouldn't love them. It just means if you're loving the rich and you're ignoring the widow and the orphan, we got an issue.
And he's also gets on them about, he's like, aren't these the people that drag you in courts as well? But that's
true.
That's a different tangent.
Yeah, and there's also probably a part of it where, like, you kind of see this like with people too, but how do I put this? Like, you could see how maybe they also got like a little too complacent, where like, so with them, they already had this like covenant with God, and even though God like obviously has like he has said like you need to follow the law and you need to be faithful, like you can see how people would get complacent and arrogant with like the fact that they're like God's chosen people, to where they like it's like the whole idea of like once you get the relationship, like you kind of get complacent and you stop like putting in all the effort you did to get there, to where like now that they're married with God, they don't have to try as hard, but like they also want like what other people have to offer. And so you know, they're not going to really try with him, but like they're going to try to now to impress these other people. To where like you can see how like people can be the same way. To where like once you have like that relationship with that person, you stop trying.
Yeah.
But then like, you know, especially if you like want other stuff, like you end up kind of trying harder with other people than like with like your partner or something.
Yeah.
To where the same idea, like I could also see them like that happening with the people of Israel, to where like they got complacent, and that also led to their downfall.
Yeah.
But yeah, and like we said earlier, like in the end, like this assembly will gather together, which seems to be the nations. That made me think of like the law too, to where like this assembly was like stoning them.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, that's what I just thought it was interesting because
yeah,
like those final verses really do make it to where it really does frame it like it's like a legal case against these two women, which in the Torah would be two members of the children of Israel, and the rest of the congregation is supposed to stone them. But now it's like the nations are representing Israel, which is like, that's just an interesting analogy from God's perspective. Like, you should be very scared if you are the people of Israel at this moment, whenever you are these sinners being stoned to death by the nations. Whenever it's like, your single job as the nation of Israel was to be the light to the nations that drew them to Yahweh. But now God is employing the nations to do against you what you were supposed to do against the sinners in your midst, if that makes sense. Right? And so since they failed to remove the sin from their midst, God is sending the Gentiles to do it, which is quite literally the opposite of what their purpose was. Yeah. Their purpose was to go out and draw the nations to God and almost be like, you know, planting little pockets of heaven everywhere they went. But instead it's the reverse. And God's like, okay, just like Uno reverse card. And
and he even calls them righteous men in verse 45. Like,
the Gentiles are the righteous men.
They're the righteous men judging, whereas like...
Not a good look.
Yeah, not a good look at all. And then, again, it ends with, thus you will know that I am Lord Yahweh. So again, we see the same language there.
Well, and also he reinforces his purpose, right? Thus I will make lewdness cease from the land. Right? He's not doing this just because he's angry and he wants to just unleash his anger. He's got an end goal, right? He chose Israel to be a kingdom of priests, a holy nation that lived for him. They're not doing that. He has sent prophet after prophet after prophet calling them to repent. They're refusing to do that. So he's like, all right, I'm determined to fulfill this somehow. I guess I'll do it myself. And so he's sending the Gentiles to wipe them out and to, burn them away, so that through that there will be this purity that comes out. And again, it's going to show up in waves to where they're going to go off to Babylon. Whenever they come back, things are going to be better, but they're not going to be fully fixed. And the people they're going to recognize like, oh, things aren't fully fixed. And that's why during the 400 years between like Old and New Testament, there's like this yearning for this Messiah figure. They're like, he's going to show up, and when he shows up, everything's going to be better. But then Jesus shows up, and like, he's basically doing the same thing that God did, where he's like, well, no, the issue is still with y'all, right? Like they're thinking, oh, Messiah's going to show up, he's going to kick out of the Romans, and then we're going to live in this utopian society. But instead, God shows up, and he's like, nope, the issue is still you and your sin. And they didn't like that, so they killed him. But plot twist, he needed to die. And that was really the whole secret behind how he was going to actually produce the righteousness and stuff. And so it's just kind of cool how you have this all being laid out here to where God's got this end goal of removing the lewdness from Israel. The question becomes, how's he going to do it?
Yeah.
And that's really the mystery of the whole Bible, right? I mean, Genesis chapter 3, they sin in the garden, and God says, don't worry, I'll fix it, right? There's going to be enmity between the woman, the serpent, their seeds, and the seed of the woman is going to crush the seed, like the serpent, and it's going to work. But then the question is like, how? And like, as you keep reading it, you're trying to figure out, like, how's this going to work? And like, he gives the Torah, but at the very end of Deuteronomy, in the Torah, Moses is like, yeah, y'all aren't going to follow this. And you're like, oh, I guess the Torah is not the solution. It's just like a step in the direction of the solution. And so I just think it's cool, like, as you're reading it, you're just like slowly, like, it's like a big mystery story. You're like, we know that he's going to solve it. We just don't know how. Yeah. And then Jesus shows up, and you're like, oh, I see. And then, like, you can go back and start reading in Genesis and see how it was set up the whole way.
Yeah.
even still, you get a lot of the time people who aren't saved. They're like, oh, Jesus died for our sins, and like they have no idea what it means because they haven't like read the
people
Old
who
Testament.
like use the fact that it was the Jews who handed Jesus over as like a means of anti-Semitism, and they're like, oh, the Jewish people killed Jesus, and that's why we should hate Jewish people. And I'm like, guys, Jesus wanted to die. Like that was part of the plan.
Yeah, well, that doesn't remove their guilt, but like the idea is like we all killed him, right? Like that's the whole point of the story. But yeah, no, that's why we make a big deal of like studying the Old Testament, because so many people I mean, if you just read the Gospels, like that's why I get so annoyed with people like, oh, which book of the Bible should I start with? People are like, John. I'm like, if you just start with the Gospels, you'll understand the story, but you won't understand why anything happens. Because the New Testament is written on the presupposition that you understand the Old Testament, right? Like if you just like read the New Testament, you're gonna be like, why the heck does circumcision come up so much? That is weird. and the Gospels never explain why Jesus had to die. It literally never explains it, right? Like later books in the New Testament, like Paul explains it more in Romans and stuff, but like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Jesus says, oh, don't worry, I need to go to Jerusalem and I need to die. He never explains why.
Yeah.
And so if you just read the Gospels, you're not going to know why. You're going to be like, that's kind of a weird story. Dude was like super chill, bunch of people hated him, they killed him, and then he came back to life, and then it just like ended. It's like, there's no understanding. But if you read the Old Testament, you're beginning to understand why it had to happen. And you're like, oh, and you can see these echoes of the Old Testament that the Gospel authors have slid into their books where you're like, oh, like, I get it now, you know? And so that's why, I mean, for this Bible study group, we've been meeting for like years. As we've gotten older, it's gotten smaller. But like, we've been in the Old Testament the entire time. We have not gotten to the New Testament yet. We've just been, I mean, we've done like a few little tangents where we like study like 1 Peter and stuff like that. But we're slowly but surely getting there.
Like
and I'm looking forward to it because once we get to the New Testament, it's going to be like, oh yes, it all makes sense. But,
Y'all have gone like in order through the whole Old Testament?
Mostly. Like, so, ironically, when we first started the Bible study, we weren't planning on it being like a super long-term thing. So we actually started with Judges, which is funny because like we basically skipped like the foundational books of the Bible, like the Torah and like Joshua and stuff. So we started with Judges, and then we just like went into 1 and 2 Samuel, then 1 and 2 Kings. And as we went through 2 Kings, we did like overviews of the prophets, like basically chronologically, like where they would fit. And then that's where we're at with Ezekiel. And Ezekiel is one of the last prophets we have to cover. And then we're going to go to like Ezra and Nehemiah, and then we're going to the New Testament. So we've gone mostly chronologically through the whole thing, which has been kind of cool.
That's really impressive.
Yeah, it's been fun because my whole conviction with the Bible study is that most churches hyper-emphasize the New Testament and don't focus on the Old Testament nearly enough. And so if we do our job, everybody in this group will be faithfully involved in a church for the rest of their lives. And so it's very likely that you will do an in-depth study through Ephesians at some point. It is a lot less likely you're going to do an in-depth study through 2 Kings, right? You might have like a pastor preach like a sermon from it here and there, and you might have like, you know, somebody do like an overview of the whole thing, but it's less likely you're going to do like a chapter a week or something like that. We've been trying to go through that. And even then with like the longer prophets, we've been doing multiple chapters a week. Like with Ezekiel, we've been, but
2 or 3, yeah.
But anyways, sorry, that was kind of a little tangent there.
Oh, no, you're good.
Any other thoughts about this before we wrap up?
I think I'm good. Anything else you want to add?
Good.
I'm kind of bummed out we didn't get to chapter 24 because like
I know.
that's like the end of this section, and but
the next
There
section
we
is
go.
kind of like Jeremiah, where the front end addresses the southern kingdom.
well, no, starting in chapter 25 and onwards, it like is talking to the nations.
Yeah, no.
But chapter 24 is like a pretty intense chapter.
And it's like
Yeah,
the
now
same
it's gonna
thing
be
here.
awkward.
It's like the climaxes with addressing the southern kingdom here, and then it goes to addressing the other kingdoms and the nations.
Yeah.
Very
Think we're
similar. Very similar pattern.
So want to pray us out?
I think Joseph did.
You got it.
All right. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us to gather here and study your word tonight. Let us not only understand these words as we read them and as you reveal them to us through David, but as you help us apply them to our daily lives. That way we're able to serve you better, spread your word better, and make disciples. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.